Hello, listeners. Been wondering how you can help the show? Probably not. But here are 5 things you can do. 1. Subscribe. Support the show by clicking the subscription link in the show notes. 2. Review on iTunes, on our website, www.afraidofnothingpodcast.com, or on whatever app you listen to. 3. Donate. When you go to our website, click the cute coffee cup icon. Or in the show notes, click the subscription link. 4. Share. Sharing really is caring. Tell your friends and even your enemies to check out the show. 5. Watch. Wait a minute, it's a podcast, not a movie. Actually, it's both. Check the show notes to find out where to watch the documentary. You can also rent it on Prime Video. That's it. Oh, one last thing. Enjoy this episode.
As we begin episode 40, we bow our heads and say grace. Frank Grace.
Well, all right! Yeah, baby! Give us your best Tarzan yell! The Afraid of Nothing podcast is a finalist in the first ever Paranormal Rewind Awards. So get your Heiny Buddy Butsky out there and cast your vote, pretty please, for the Afraid of Nothing podcast. Go to paranormalrewind.com and click on the awards tab. Then you know what to do. Hey!
In a world where nothing is known, nothing is certain, reality is not real. Wake up! Be afraid of nothing. I'm Bob Heskey.
Robert. The host with the ghost.
This is my podcast, based on my paranormal documentary, Afraid of Nothing. Each episode, we talk to people who see life and the afterlife through a different lens. Join me.
Who is this large man? And what's he doing in our bedroom?
As we lift the veil and open our minds to see beyond our eyes lie. This is Afraid of Nothing.
About 13 years ago, when I was a new parent, I would try to take good pictures of my daughter Carly, but I would inevitably get an awkward grimace, weepy face, or gassy look. Then around 18 months, my ex-wife convinced me to have portraits taken by a professional, and magically, we saw a portfolio of images that floored us and even made us cry. Our baby girl had Shirley Temple good looks. She took after her father. So many absolutely stunning images that we gladly plunked down $500 to get almost all of them. That's the magic of a professional photographer's eye. They capture something in a person, place, or building that's quintessential. In today's episode, we have a real pro. His name is Frank Grace, and he's a paranormal photographer, although he's really a jack of all trades and will photograph almost anything. A picture is worth 1,000 words, so you can check out Frank's work at www.trigphotography.com. That's TRIG photography.com. You can also connect with Frank on Facebook, like I did, at www.facebook.com/Trig Photography. Frank, welcome to the show.
Hey, Bob, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, man. Thanks for the invite.
Oh, cool. We have a mutual friend, Jeff Belanger, who always speaks great about you, so I wanted to get you on the show. I mean, Frank, we had bad weather, like a storm a couple weeks ago, and God forbid another one coming up this week. So when the weather turns bad, you go outside. You want to talk about where you went on the snowstorm about a week or so ago in December?
There's a lighthouse near me. I'm in Acushnet, Massachusetts, and right next to New Bedford. So I love the lighthouses here. I'm dying to get a shot of a lighthouse in a storm. I have a few but I wanted something with kind of waves crashing in. So I went to Butler Flats Lighthouse, and it's in the harbor, so it's going into the ocean, but you can reach it from the shore pretty well. The wind was whipping, the rain was whipping. I'm like, oh, maybe there's going to be some, whiteheads out there and waves and everything to smash it against the side of it. Because this is they call it a spark plug lighthouse. So it's there in the middle of the ocean. There's no island, there's nothing.
So did you have to take a boat out, like a ferry or a boat out there?
I have in the past. That's another story. That's the story where I was actually hanging from the side of that lighthouse. So I can tell you the story first of actually getting to this lighthouse. The lighthouse was abandoned for many years. It was one of those places where I love the abandoned stuff, right?
Sure.
Places that you don't really get to see. So a friend of mine, unbeknownst to me, he contacted the harbor master in New Bedford, and he says, hey, I want to go shoot the lighthouse. We get there, and he makes all the arrangements. We get there, and we meet up with the harbor master, and he says, so which lighthouse do you want to go to again? Right. And I can't believe we're doing this because it's not every day, the harbor master allows you to go into these places when you're a nobody. They don't know who I am. They don't know who anybody is. Right. So he brings us out there. And at first he says, I really hope you reconsider going out to this lighthouse because it's pretty dangerous. I'm like, well, why is it dangerous? And he says, well, the police were here yesterday. The environmental police were here to check on the lighthouse. And they checked in with me and said, we're going to take a boat up there. And he says, I could take you up there. And the environmental police were like, no, we'll do it ourselves. He says, well, I'm going to follow you out there because this is kind of my territory, and I just want to make sure everything's okay. And they said, sure. So they take one of these really expensive inflatable boats to go check on the lighthouse. Since it's been abandoned, they're checking the structure and everything. Apparently, they went there the day before that we were going to go out there, and they ended up sinking the boat. So it's a good thing the harbor master was there to rescue them. There's a jagged ladder hanging on the side of this thing that you pretty much have to jump on to get into to climb up to get into the lighthouse. And they ripped apart the boat trying to climb onto the lighthouse. Wow. And and the ladder.
And so you went the next day and did that, Frank? You didn't, undeterred, you went and did that?
I'm like, well, the harbor master's there. He'll save me, right? And as they say, there's a fine line between stupidity and bravery. And I'm not that brave. But so I'm climbing up the ladder. So I get to he brings us right up to the front of it. And my friend of mine who was there with me is a heavy guy. And the harbor master looks at him, he says, points to me, he says, you can go up there. And he looks to my friend, he goes, you're not going to make it up there. That's too small of an opening. And I climb on this ladder. He pulls the boat up to the side. And the side of the boat, as I jump onto this ladder with my camera bag hanging on the back of me, I look down, I see the piece of a boat get ripped off and just float away. It's almost like a styrofoam piece. And as I'm hanging there, the ladder is swaying. It's held on by rusty screws and bolts and some rope that is fraying. And I'm hanging there and I look straight down and it was pretty scary. As I say to the harbor master, I say to the guy, you coming in too? He's like, oh, no, I'm not going in there. I'm like, well, why not? He goes, that place is haunted. I'm not going to go inside of there. You get some weird stuff in there. I'm like, really? I'm like, I haven't heard that. He says, oh, yeah, I'm not going in there. I'll wait out here for you guys, for you to finish. But last week or 2 weeks ago in the storm, I did it from the shore, which was also an issue because it was so windy that the camera was blowing over. First, I have an idea. I'm going to take the photo from inside the Jeep parked on the side of the road. Well, if you've ever been inside a Jeep Wrangler in a windstorm, it may as well be a giant sail. So the camera was moving. Everything was moving. I get click off one shot from the shore. I'm soaking wet, and it actually turned out pretty good, but it was a nightmare. Yeah, it was an adventure. Every time you go out with the camera, there's some kind of adventure.
So look, by day, you're a mild-mannered chemist, and by night, you're a kind of super photographer. You do a bunch of things like portraits and a wide range of things, but you found the paranormal niche as well. So you mind telling us how you discovered that and what your first location was?
I blame my dad for the paranormal interest, right? He's always had UFO books around as a kid and ghost story books, but mostly UFOs. And, he'd watch In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy and stuff like that. And I was always fascinated by it. I talked to him a little bit about it. He wouldn't talk too much about it, but I would I'd pick up the books and, look through them. I think one was like Out of the Blue, and he had Project Blue books and the Philadelphia Experiment and things like that. So it's always been in the back of my mind. Why can't we explain these things or understand a lot of these things? So it's always been there. What causes these things? And when I first started, messing around with the camera, one of the places I wanted to go to was the Lizzie Borden house. And that's because I grew up in Fall River. I still live very close to Fall River. So I contacted the Lizzie Borden Bread and Breakfast, asked for permission, and then it's kind of started from there.
So as a photographer, like I know I've done this kind of ghost hunting thing myself. As a photographer, you're kind of in and out, like an hour, 90 minutes? Is that roughly it?
No, I'm usually there for a long time because
you are? Okay.
As I explain it to the people that let me in, I'm like, I'll stay here as long as you let me stay here. But I don't want to overstay my welcome. If you have to go someplace or you have to close down, I'll leave as well. And that's because I end up doing a lot of what they call HDR photography. It's high dynamic range. So you take a lot of overexposed and a lot of underexposed images and kind of blend them together so you can see detail in the shadows and the highlights. And you see something that a regular single shot can't see. And why I stay there a while is usually the places are on the dark side. So you have long exposures. So, sometimes the longest exposure for one frame is like 30 seconds.
Yep.
It doesn't sound like a lot, but there's like 5 shots going at the same time. So that's when, during those 30-second shots, you kind of look around and appreciate where you are and take the time.
What room in Lizzie Borden, because I was there for the documentary, what room in Lizzie Borden did you find most photogenic?
Oh, definitely the couch where Mr. Borden was slain. Yeah, that's because it's so iconic, right? The photo, the crime scene photo, but I would say the basement is definitely the creepiest part of it. I tend not to feel like things like that. I always, I make the joke that I'm as sensitive as a block of wood when it comes to the paranormal stuff. Every now and then you get a weird feeling. Yeah. But at the Lizzie Borden house is where I first met Tim Weisberg and Jeff Belanger at a Legend Trips event.
Yep.
So that's kind of how I met those guys.
Were they there at the same time, or was it an event you were there together with?
I discovered Tim's show, Spooky South Coast at the time, right? On here in New Bedford on Saturday nights. Became friends with him on Facebook, and he asked for if anybody had a photo of a Ouija board. So I've taken photos with Ouija. I got a bunch of Ouija boards, and I've taken photos with a candle. And he said, I need it for a book, and I sent it to him. He was like, oh my, can I use this? I'm like, absolutely, sure. And then I think it was around April, he said, hey, we'd love to have you shoot some photos at our next Legend Trips event that they used to have a lot, right? They'd go to haunted places and have a lecture and a ghost hunt after. Yeah. I'm like, oh man, yeah, count me in. I am there. And that kind of really kickstarted everything. And at that same night, Jeff approached me and said, hey, I love your stuff. And do you want to do a calendar together? And that was the first time we talked about doing a calendar. And I think that was like 2012.
Wow.
It's been that way since. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the calendar. You usually we like to plug things on this show, but you guys are so popular. Your work's so great. You're already sold out of the calendar. We're still going to talk about some of the places you went to, but yeah, that's crazy. I mean, the basement in Lizzie Borden, when I was there with the shaman, he really picked up on something, a presence that was there before, like Lizzie Borden. He almost felt it was like a demonic thing that had lived there before even the house was erected, and then it really fed off of the negative energy.
By the way, documentary was awesome.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm so glad I found you and watched it. It was really, really good. But yeah, I think he said it was like an elemental or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. He thought it was, I don't know if he thought it was like a demonic, I think thought he might have. But everyone throws everything into the demonic thing. Elemental is demonic. There's kind of like a line between them. But yeah,
right.
It was definitely not human, all right? It was not like Ghost of Mr. Borden or Lizzie, but it was something before that had been there for a while. Yeah, the basement at a lot of places are pretty bad. The S.K. Pierce house right down the street from me, a lot of people have some bad experiences there.
Oh, yeah, that place. When I shot that place, I was there with Tanya, I think, was minding the house. I asked her if I could go photograph the house. And this is before it was all restored and everything. It was right after Edwin still lived there, the owner before.
Yeah, the last show right before this, Joni Mahan wrote a book called Bones in the Basement about that. Their story.
Yeah, a lot of my photos were in that.
Oh, is it really? Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Yep. She attracts so many entities. It's like crazy. She talked about the basement and how I don't know. There was some couple from New York was going to meet her, but they got stuck in this storm. So Marion Luama called her about it, and she said you ride it out. There's a tornado coming. You can ride out in the basement. She said, nope, I'll take my chances outside. So it's that's another great place. We'll go into that in a minute, but let's try. What is the most dangerous or ill-advised? I guess it sounds like it was Butler Flats. Was that like the most dangerous or ill-advised location? You kind of almost sacrificed your life and limbs to get the perfect shot.
Oh yeah, that was definitely. I'm trying to. Yeah, Butler Flats, I think was definitely the one that was scary. Physical harm could have ensued for sure.
Yeah, wow. I'm going to ask you some basic questions if you don't mind. And this is one you probably hear all the time, but what makes a good picture when you go into a location? What makes a good picture? Is it just natural with you at this point, or is there certain training in you that you say I gotta do X, Y, and Z to get the perfect shot that I'm looking for?
Well, that's a good question because I've been in art galleries before and had stuff hanging, and you'll get the artsy types come over and hey, I want to talk to you about this photo you have over here, and they'll I know what you were thinking here and there and this and why you did this, and I look at them and the answer is usually. I hate to disappoint you, but it looked really good through the viewfinder, so I pressed the button.
Yeah.
So,
I got to tell you, what I noticed from your photography, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you do a great job taking a location and capturing it in its environment where it's almost like it's got a degree of depth to it and there's like some color play. And it's just, you really kind of do a great job of taking it in a location or a room. And it's almost like there's an extra dimension to it when you film it. Has anybody ever said that to you?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Thanks for that. Jeff and Tim have described it as I tell a story with a single photo,
which is hard to do. Yeah, it's great.
And the joke is I'm like, well, you guys tell stories for a living. That's way harder than a single photo, and we've always debated back and forth, which is more difficult. The key for me with a good photo is you look at if you see something. And instantly, you got to stare at it, or it brings something out in you, or your eyes start wandering all through the photo. But my objective, I guess it would be subconscious, is that you want to process and have the photo look like when you felt you were there. So it doesn't necessarily look like that when you're there. I mean, things are exaggerated and everything in a lot of the photos. But you want to get that feeling like when you were there. That's kind of what I strive for.
No, that's great because that's another thing. It's almost, I think that's another thing I would probably think subconsciously is looking at it as you can envision yourself being there because it's got a sense of not just a flat two-dimensional picture. It's got an atmosphere to it, which is really cool. What's the essential equipment to bring to a site? If you had to bring one camera, what would it be if you're going somewhere?
I love my full-frame camera. Right now I'm using a Nikon D850. It does everything I need it to do. It's a really powerful camera. But so between the two main things for me is the camera and a wide angle. Well, three things, I guess. The camera, a wide angle lens, because I love the wide shots where you can capture the width of something, a whole room or a good part of the room. That and a tripod to put the camera on. So like I said, these places are usually on the dark side. So you don't want any camera shake, especially if you're taking a bunch of shots at different exposures of the same frame. Definitely those things, but I'll bring a bunch of other lenses. Lately, I've been trying to focus in on getting the room shots, the full room shots, and then the detail shots, like things in the room that you might not catch when you're walking through it.
So what's your favorite piece of glass for wide angle and close-up?
Oh, my wide angle is definitely the Nikon 14 to 24 millimeter 2.8. That thing is sharp as a tack, wide. There's hardly any distortion to it. It's a beautiful lens. Expensive, but beautiful lens.
And what about for the extreme close-ups?
Extreme close-ups, I tend to use a macro lens. Basically, you can get the lens really, really close to get detail, and that's a 105 millimeter Nikon lens too. But you can get some pretty good stuff with 24 to 70 millimeter or a 50 standard. They call it a nifty 50, a 50 millimeter lens.
Yep.
Lots of different choices. Gives you all different perspectives, and it's a ton of fun photographing things. I always learn something new each time I go out. There's it's like a challenge. There's something that you have to overcome.
Now, since you've been doing paranormal photography, has it always been digital, or were you on film first and then kind of migrated?
Always been digital for that stuff. I had a film camera when I was in my 20s and stuff like that. My dad had a Canon, I think it was a AE1 or something like that, and I tried to play around with the film camera, right? Totally manual. I didn't know how to use it. I had no clue what I was doing. And then I got like a 110 film camera in my 20s, and my first film camera, a 35 millimeter film camera in like I think it was like 2002 or something like that. And then I graduated up to a digital. When digital really became popular, I went with a digital DSLR. So one of the big cameras.
So have you stayed with Nikon pretty much throughout, or did you start with Canon and then go to Nikon? Or
I was with Pentax for a long time. Then I went to Nikon when I wanted to go to like a full frame camera with a little more quality, more megapixels, and more bells and whistles to be able to play around with.
what do you think about like full frame versus mirrorless?
I am actually eyeballing mirrorless right now. I'm thinking about getting a Sony. I want a Sony AR7 IV in the worst way. So
They're great.
I'm going to wait till this whole pandemic thing's over and see how everything turns out first.
Print some more calendars, Frank. You can afford it then. Print another.
That's it. That's what I keep telling Jeff. We got to sell more calendars and everything. Come on.
Yeah, we should. We'll talk about that in a minute. Actually, I want to ask you on the paranormal side. You always hear people talking about, "Ooh, there's an orb in a photo." As a photographer, what are your thoughts on orbs in photos?
Most orbs, if they were taken with a flash, I almost immediately negate them as dust, moisture, anything like that, because all those, it's easily reproducible with dust or even with a mist. Just because of it's too close to the lens, it's too far away from the lens, it's not in focus, and you get a nice perfect circle, which photographers call that bokeh. Or bokeh, they pronounce it different. We get those out of focus balls of light in the background of something.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if it's taken without a flash, that's kind of suspect. I usually say, well, if somebody gives me something to look at and say, well, what do you think? Take a look at this, and it's like you don't want to burst their bubble because you can kind of see that some people really do believe in it.
Yeah, yeah.
So it really comes down to personal experience. I wasn't there. You were. What did you feel something? Then own it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's you. But there's a lot of you'd be surprised how many people look at my photos and say, "Oh my God, look at the right. There's a guy standing there. Look in the shadows. Look in this. Look in that." And I don't see anything.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. That's another question I was going to ask you was, in all the thousands of pictures you're taking, once you've brought them back and put them into whatever, what do you use for a program to edit your images?
Mostly Photoshop with a host of different plugins, different things to mess around with the images. But Photoshop is like the core of everything that I use. Photoshop and Lightroom.
Have you ever noticed something when you've gone back into Lightroom or Photoshop and blew it up or looked at it and said, wait a minute, that looks kind of weird?
Only 2 times. A lot of it's I can disqualify as anything paranormal or probably not paranormal because we don't know we don't know what happens after any of this, right? We're not sure yet. We want to know, but we don't.
Yeah.
But if I'm taking a series of 5 shots in a row and that orb is still there and I look to the left and I see a light coming in and refracting off my lens, I know exactly what caused it. And if I move the camera just a hair, it goes away. And I move it back, it's there again. I know it's a light reflecting in the lens.
So also, if you're watching these paranormal shows that Jeff is on or Tim or other people, and you see some of these photos caught on camera or captured a picture or something, can you pretty much tell looking at, that's not real. That was staged or whatever. Do you see a lot of those and very skeptical?
I tend to be skeptical about it because in a digital camera, the sensor that they use in a digital camera captures visible light with a very, very small amount of infrared light. So anything that goes into that camera with a very tiny bit of infrared light, you should be able to see. And usually the camera shutter speed is so fast that thing would have to show up for a split, hundredths of a second, and then go away right when you press that shutter button. It's tricky, man. It's amazing all the debate that can go over it because I want to say a lot of the things. No, I haven't caught anything on camera yet, but I can't rule anything out. We don't know.
What about those photos that people take where they take a picture, they don't see anything, and then they go back a day later and like almost like something has kind of been exposed or been developed and there's something there. What are your thoughts on that? That it just can't happen from a chemist's mind or a photographer's mind. Nothing should process after you take the picture and then you go back and look at it and, oh my God, there's a person in the window or something, right?
Right. The perfect example of that, right, is are you familiar with the Schofield experiment?
No.
Schofield experiment. If you ever have a chance to, I think it was on Netflix. I'm not sure if it's on anymore, but it's probably definitely on YouTube. And this was a group of psychics that got together to talk to the dead in Schofield. I believe it was England. And they even got to the point where they ramped everything up, where they would have sealed rolls of film still in the canister. And they would have things appearing on that film, locked in a box, signatures of dead people long gone. I think one of them might have been like a signature of Leonardo da Vinci and things like that. And they swear, now again, I wasn't there during this, but the story is intriguing, right? They'd take the film in the box with the receipt. They'd have people bring the film. It was all seances that they would do. And they would have them leave messages on these canisters of film that were not touched. And then they would bring it to get developed. And sure enough, there were messages on the film. So it's like, if that's not real, how did they fake that? And if it is real, how did they do that?
Yeah. Both are like equally impressive, right?
I love science stuff, right? It's my job during the day. I walk a fine line between none of this is real and, wow, a lot of it could be real. I constantly walk the line there because you want to believe something is happening, right? We don't know what it is, but too many people see too many things and experience too many things that can't say that none of it is real. So I am a believer.
I have to ask you, since you're a scientist, in watching You're Afraid of Nothing, and part of it we have this guy, Bob Berman, he talks about biocentrism. Basically, in a nutshell, most people think the Big Bang happened. They don't even ask what happens before the Big Bang. The Big Bang happened, and this silly, stupid, happy accident happened where we had carbon and oxygen, and we were able to have, all this dumb matter, and all of a sudden, out of this dumb matter, we were able to have consciousness, humans with consciousness,
Right.
and it just all worked out that way. Whereas biocentrism posits something different, that consciousness creates reality, and we kind of have an impact on that. When you watched that as a scientist, what was and feel free, go ahead, let me have it. But what was your thought when you were watching that part of it? Were you buying into it, or were you very skeptical about that?
Immediately when that guy started talking and he was on for what was his name again? I can't remember.
His name's Bob Berman. He was he co-wrote the book with Dr. Robert Lanza, who's like one of the top scientists. He's very big on cloning and a bunch of other things.
So as soon as he was on there a bunch of times during the documentary, I paused the documentary and immediately downloaded a couple of his audiobooks. That's how fascinated I was with what he was saying. So I am totally on board with that being one of the possibilities, right? We don't know what consciousness is. We don't know where it comes from, where it resides, what happens when we're gone. Totally fascinating. I looked at it as there are things that science had no idea what caused them, right? Germs, washing your hands, right? To not catch colds. Surgeons never used to wash their hands till somebody discovered germs, right? Like that thing. We don't know everything yet.
Yeah.
When I think of things like that, like one of the things I think of is we're not sure if we're even capable of understanding this in our current form, if that makes any sense.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because books you should download if you get a chance, if you haven't already. So Bob Berman's written a bunch of books about astronomy, but also he actually, I'm saying this, not him. He actually was able to go into Robert Lanza's mind, and because it was a concept we weren't familiar with, and there weren't, words as symbols, right? It's all trying to like making something so we can comprehend. He was the guy that was able to go into Dr. Robert Lanza's head to explain it to the layman like myself, and probably to a lesser degree you, what this is, what biocentrism is. So you may want to, if you haven't done it, the first book, Biocentrism and Beyond Biocentrism, and the third one just came out actually about a week ago. The first two are highly recommended. They do a great job, and they kind of build off of each other without being repetitive.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Somebody else, another guy wrote a book. He was on actually Tim's show when I first heard it. It was Beyond the Cosmic Veil. is the name of the book. And it's a lot of that type thing of looking at the paranormal in a different way. And one of the things this other guy talked about was we can't even comprehend like a fifth dimension, right? We can't even comprehend that. Like, can we? Even if, can our brains comprehend that? It's
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's staggering, man.
Yeah.
I love not knowing, but wanting to know.
Yeah, I was trying to interview a bunch of different quantum mechanics people for the film, and there were some I talked to, like at MIT, that liked it, but they didn't want to risk their reputation, because it's a
Right, yeah,
paranormal
yep.
show, right? It's a big, paranormal. And we got a
Exactly.
shaman walking around and psychics and mediums. They're like, well, if you want to do one just on quantum mechanics, come back. I mean, the whole thing for the documentary for me was the connection from spirituality and the paranormal and quantum mechanics, and there's kind of a crossover. I mean, that's a spoiler for people, but the last part of the film, I take 3 people that are in the film that you kind of meet earlier. It's almost kind of like an anthology of different paranormal people and experiences. And I take 3 of them, and Bob Berman's one of them, that had this crazy experience when he was in college that kind of cemented why he believed so much in what biocentrism is, because it made sense to him because he had experienced it to a certain degree. The fact that science is kind of melding a little bit with that is strangely comforting to me as I head towards 60 in a couple of years.
Right. It's all, man, it's all it is just all fascinating. Yeah, I totally agree. Now, I think there are some people that are completely out of their minds in the paranormal field, right? That they're totally, everything's a ghost and everything is supernatural, everything's this and everything's that. But yeah, it's you gotta pick and choose. And like Bob Berman, that he was fascinating, totally fascinating. I loved everything he had to say. I was on the edge of the seat the whole time.
That's a huge compliment. Thank you. One of the guys I interviewed recently was Brandon Alves from Ghost Hunters, and he's very key on taking the data back, the evidence, and showing it to people in other fields who are good at looking at this type of data and validating it. And he's leading edge on that and really being focused and going to a location not once, but many times, sometimes over the course of like a decade. There is a subset of the paranormal that's really trying to connect to the scientific evidence. Go to scientists in certain fields that are expert in that type of tracking of energy and seeing what they come up with. So that's all good stuff. I mean, you watch these paranormal programs, you need a quick closure. Like Jeff does a great job on Ghost Adventures, but you need you go to a location, you experience something, you wrap it up, and you go to the next one. In reality, it takes a lot more research and a lot of times going back to a place to really get to the root of it.
And part of the problem with scientists are when it comes to paranormal is that right now, everything we got, it's not repeatable. We could say, okay, does water really freeze at 32 degrees Fahrenheit? Well, you can run that experiment 100 times and you can repeat it. But, you can't go into the Lizzie Borden house and have something happen and ask for it to happen 100 times in a row. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
That's not the nature of the phenomenon.
Yeah. And we talked offline, and you said you really haven't had many, if any, paranormal experiences. And to put that in context, our friend Jeff Belanger, who's been doing Ghost Adventures for, 14, 15 years, research for it. Out of all those years, I mean, he's not with them as they're walking around collecting evidence. He's kind of the research guy ahead of it. But in his 15 years, he's had a handful or less than 5 really kind of ghost experiences. And one was in the catacombs, which is in the film. And there's another one, there's a couple that he's had. One was by himself, and another was with a group, which was great. You had that group dynamic where it was more than one person that kind of witnesses. So you're right. I mean, people that are even embedded in this field, it's far and in between the number of paranormal experiences that they have that they actually believe. Brandon Alves was another case of that as well.
I actually have a shared kind of an experience with Jeff at the Conjuring House, if you want to hear it.
Yeah, I'd love to. Was that recently, like last year?
That was last year.
Okay.
So what happened was when Corey bought the house, you heard the whole story with Jeff. He contacted Jeff, and Jeff said, hey, you want to come photograph the house if I can get permission for you to shoot the house.
So Frank, I'm just gonna set that up for the listeners really quick.
Sure, go ahead.
Corey and Jen Hines buy the Conjuring House in 2019, I think, the summer of 2019, right? And Corey, I think he reaches out to Jeff Belanger, lets him know, and says, would you like to see it? And Jeff is, yeah, I'd like to see it. And then he comes down right away, like within the first night or something. I don't know. Pretty close when they moved in. Jeff was there, I think, that night, correct? So that's just a setup. I just wanted to is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate. Yep.
Okay.
So I went there just after Ghost Adventures filmed their special there. So we went there and I met everybody and we started shooting the house. And while I was shooting the house outside, photographing the house outside, Jeff and Ray were doing a live New England Legends podcast episode for the house, speaking to Corey and Jen. So when they were done, then I went inside and was photographing the inside of the house. And as I'm photographing the inside of the house, I was in where the kitchen area is. And Jeff, Ray, and Corey were at the seance table, that table that was in front of the fireplace.
Yeah.
Where the seance happened, the original seance with Ed and Lorraine.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm shooting that and I hear them, trying to do a little seance, asking, not a seance, but asking, is anybody here? And all of a sudden I hear a thump and they all jump up. Now I'm in another room and they're like, you got to come over here. And we come running over them. Like, what happened? He goes, oh, something moved in the house. Did you hear it? I'm like, yeah, I heard it. And I heard you guys respond to it. We go to the library area and we look, and I look, and there's an old laptop case on the floor. I said, oh, that case there, it fell. I put it there. It was in the way of the shot. It looked out of place in the library, so I moved it and leaned it against the wall. So apparently it fell down. So we're thinking it just slid out, the bottom slid out from under it, and it scraped down the wall and hit the floor. And Corey said, well, I got a camera in this room. We ran over to the cameras. He pulled the tape. So if we're leaning this bag against the wall, it actually went against gravity. The bottom part on the floor didn't move. The top moved away from the wall and fell down on the floor on its own.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's the only thing that happened, but we were all looking at it like, oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah. The library, that's happened a couple times. That room has some weird energy and some backstory to it, but I think there have been other cases where they've captured something falling without anybody pushing it. So yeah, that's definitely a cool room.
Right.
Yeah, that's in the first floor. And then upstairs, did you feel anything upstairs and kind of the bedrooms, especially in the middle part where a lot of the bad stuff's supposed to happen? Or
I didn't feel anything, but I was a little leery being up there. Right before that, they showed us all the video they had of the lights flashing on and off in the house for no reason when there's no lights in those rooms up there. Like they're a very far bedroom. But I didn't feel anything when I was up there. But it was a lot of times when I'm visiting these places, I just feel I'm at awe that I get to be there, right? It's like it's a time machine for me, the camera. It brings me back into places that I normally don't get to go to.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I felt I had tunnel vision on the paranormal before I made the documentary. My ex-wife was somewhat psychic. I had a daughter with autism, and there was some kind of interesting stuff that was going on with her. And that's how we actually met the shaman. And then once I started going to these locations, I say this, I've repeated this story on some of the prior episodes, but basically, long story short, much easier for me to pick up EVPs than ever before. It was getting too easy, and it was saying my name. Not like Bob, Robert Heskey, like that.
Wow.
Yeah, or I'd ask a question and mention my daughter, Carly. And there's the stuff that you actually saw in the documentary as well. So, yeah, it was happening too easily. And there's stuff that happened I didn't even put in the documentary that happened, which it was happening too easy. So I just kind of stopped it because once you start experiencing stuff, you'll realize that you can start experiencing stuff. It's like learning how to drive a stick shift. It becomes easier. You start accessing stuff a lot more easier. So, yeah. So at some point, Frank, you might be in a location, pull out a Ouija board or do something, and then a whole window of stuff might happen to you at some point. You never know.
You never know. But was it Nietzsche who said, if you look into the abyss will look back at you?
Yeah,
Something
somebody's
like that?
wicked smart did, right? But yeah, that's definitely true. Like the Indians looking out into the water and not seeing Christopher Columbus coming because they weren't used to seeing that. It wasn't like their reality, right? Then once they saw it and they recognized it, they're there, and it just your reality changes.
Right.
I want to dive in. I know it's not available right now, unless you guys please. It would be great if you did a reprint on these, but your 2021, is it called Haunted New England calendar? Or?
Yes, it's a Haunted New
England. Yes, it's called that.
Yeah,
right?
Haunted New England. Yep.
And you do it with partnership with Jeff Belanger, and you've been doing it since 2012. You mind if we just kind of go over this year's calendar or some of the places that you did just to give people a flavor of some of the stuff that you film at?
Sure, absolutely. And I love the fact that it's almost like a traveling guide. So any place that's in the calendar you can actually go to, as opposed to like an abandoned place or something, or somebody's haunted home that they live in. So these are places that you can actually go and visit yourself.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, he has an app too. I don't know if you're involved in that, an app where like all his New England Legends podcasts, where you can pull up those locations and find out information about each episode and where it is and all that great stuff.
Yes, I'm part of the New England Legends crew.
There we go. That's great.
Yep.
Emmy nominated crew, right? Isn't Emmy nominated?
That's right. That's right.
So let's go to the calendar. I'm going to name the location, your impression of it, and maybe just one sentence about the haunted story or whatever behind it. Okay.
Yep.
So I think the first one is the Eunice Williams Bridge, called the Screaming Bridge in Greenfield, Mass.
Right. So that one has the story of the French and Indians were chasing out the British colonists. They drew blood, and what happened was they rounded up a bunch of people, a bunch of the colonists, and I think they were headed up to where Canada is. And one of the women's, Eunice Williams, had just given birth a few days ago. She was not in great shape. They ended up killing her because she was slowing down the rest of the group, and it was right near where that bridge was built. So she was slaughtered there.
Wow.
Yeah. Her husband, Reverend Williams, watched it all happen, and there's actually a memorial near the bridge of what he had to say about it, how the savages slaughtered his wife and cold blood and everything. Yeah. So they say that at night you can hear I wasn't there at night, but they say that at night you can still hear the screams of Eunice Williams trying to stay alive and get away, but she couldn't.
Boy, that seems like that would be good for January 2020, which was a really lousy year.
No
2021, right? But that would have been good for this year too. All right, Let's go on to February. The York Witch in York, Maine.
So that's a woman who, what was her name? Mary Nason. She was a townie that had a creepy reputation. Weird things would happen, and she supposedly cast spells, and she just had the reputation of a witch, and everybody was always afraid of her. When she was buried, and what the actual stone has a woman, and you can see cleavage on the stone, which was a big no-no back then. So it even made more of a sensation in the area. And with that too is a giant slab of rock that is in no other grave in that cemetery. They said, it started saying, well, it was to keep the animals from digging up the body. And of course, it turned to, well, no, that's to keep the witch in her grave.
Before I moved here in Westminster, which has a flat roof, by the way, which I hate because of all the snow, I lived in the second oldest house in Shrewsbury, like it was around the 1700s, early 1700s. There was a colonel that lived there and an alleged witch. And in the basement, when my friend came down from Indiana and helped me take off the siding, just shore it up a bit before we had the professionals re-side it, there was this huge, like 300-pound cast iron. It looked like a key, Frank. It was like 3.5, 4 feet tall. It goes up to like over your navel, and it was super heavy. And he just dragged it out. I had always seen it down there, and I didn't know what the hell it was. And he was like, "Wow, is this the key to Boston Harbor? Because or is this whatever? It looks like a key." I had contacts with Antique Roadshow, Channel 2. I had contacts someone that worked there, and no one knew of anything of that. And they said, the thing is, you're not going to get a buyer because no one knows anything like that exists. They used to have like maybe a 30-pound ornamental key that a locksmith would have outside their home or whatever, but no one had no idea what that thing was. So I ended up selling it for really cheap at an auction, and who knows? Maybe it'll be a great prop for a movie. But
wow.
Witches out in Shrewsbury too. Yeah. Let's go to Gungy Womp. I love that. Jeez, Gungy. Am I saying this right? Gungy Womp.
That's Gungy Womp. Yeah, I had never heard of that place until I went there.
Gungy Womp, Groton, Vermont.
No, that's Groton, Connecticut. That one.
Connecticut. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So that's a cool place that Jeff found. He got permission to go in there because it's on private property, and he called the woman that owns it. You could still go on there, and they let people in there every now and then. I think it was like an off season when we were there. So there used to be a colony there a long time ago, but they have dated some of the structures. There's weird caves, stone structures there, and circles, and they dated them back to potentially 2000 BC.
Oh.
Yeah, very, very strange. You can still see a lot of the old cellars from the old houses that used to be there. the strangest things is there's actually this one cave that has a certain hole in it, and at the equinox, it lights and fills up this whole thing with light. So it's almost like kind of like the America's Stonehenge. Have you ever been there?
No, but I've heard of it.
So it's almost like it's some type of calendar, but way before we had calendars. So they didn't know if it was related to the Celtics or what. Yeah, and it was considered a sacred site. That was one of the places that we were walking through, and we stopped, and I said, Jeff, it feels weird here. And he goes, yeah, I feel it too. It's just a weird feeling there. It was just, I don't know. It was creepy for no good reason. There wasn't anything creepy going on, but a weird sight for sure. Especially when you crawl into the cave and you see the opening with where the light would come in on the equinox. Yeah.
Wow. Now for April, let's go to the White Mountains in New Hampshire, Mount Chikoru. Well, I'm probably
Chikoru. Yeah, Chakaru.
I was close,
yeah.
right? I was totally off. All right.
That one's a cursed mountain. That's why if you on the photo, it's mostly just rock, and that's an Indian curse from somebody that had a colonist that slaughtered an Indian's child, I believe, and cursed the whole land up there that nothing would grow. And supposedly the Indian also haunts there as well as being cursed.
It's always weird. The Indian curses are always much stronger than the white man curses. Because like the Eunice Bridge, the Screaming Bridge, he's mad, he loses his wife. But this one seems like a stronger curse, in April. So because it's so much closer to the land.
Yeah, and it's crazy because you look at the photo of it, and there's green lush all around, except this rocky mountain. That's the top of the mountain from all sides. We drove around all sides of it, and it's bare to the bone up there.
Now let's go to May, my birth month, the Russell Colbath House in Albany, New Hampshire.
Yeah, so that one's an interesting place. The Russell family built that house in, I think it was early 1800s or late 1800s. Russell ended up marrying Ruth. So Ruth was the woman that was the wife of the house. I can't remember Russell's first name. But they were married for a while, and then one day in 1891, Mr. Colbath says, "Hey, I'll be back. I gotta go out," and he never came back. So she waited for 39 years. She left a candle in the window, waiting for him to come home. Right after she died, guess who came home?
Oh, God.
The husband.
That's such a tragic story.
Right. And he was like in his 80s when he came back. And he looked, and she had lost everything, and she was considered a hermit, and she never married again. And the story is that they didn't know if she just wanted to be a hermit and didn't want anything to do with men anymore, or she really was waiting for the husband. They say that she still hangs around the house because she loved the house, and the house is gorgeous, and it's run by by New Hampshire now. But that was one place when we were doing the interview with one of the park rangers. He opens the door and he says, at first he said, "No, this place is not haunted." He lets us in, and he starts saying hello to Mrs. Colbath, and we're here to visit, and we're just going to do a few interviews. And Jeff's like, "Wait a minute. I thought you said this place isn't haunted. You're talking to a ghost." He goes, "Oh, I just do that just in case."
Yeah, everybody does. Isn't that funny? Everybody does. Yeah. All right. So now to June in Warren, Rhode Island. I'm going to butcher another name here. You gave me a bunch of tricky names on this. The Kikamuit River Floating Heads.
Yeah. So good one. That one's based on or related to the King Philip's War. That's kind of one of the things that started the whole King Philip's War, where the Indians were fighting the colonists, and King Philip was leading the charge.
Which, by the way, is on the Conjuring land too. There's supposed to be a bloodbath between the Indians and the colonials on that land as well. Yeah,
exactly. Right. Correct. Yeah, they even think that some of those soldiers buried somewhere have to do with that. From that Conjuring story.
Yep.
So what happened was the Indians would go and they would destroy all the homes on the riverbanks, but they never hurt anybody. But they destroyed the homes and properties, and the settlers there decided, no, we're not going to take this, and they drew first blood against the Indians. So they killed one of the Indians. The Indians soon decided, okay, they drew first blood. They rounded up 11 people, murdered them, and put their heads on spikes, and on the banks of the river. And to this day, they said if every now and then you can see 11 floating heads on the river.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
it's a gruesome story.
All righty. Let's get to in July, Portland, Maine, the Portland Head Light.
So that one's a classic lighthouse story, right? The whole lighthouse is all alone. It's his own job. It's a thankless job. It's lonely all the time. That area is interesting because there was also a shipwreck right off that lighthouse. And that shipwreck was right around, I believe it was like Christmas Eve. And they still say that the victims from the shipwreck, as well as the lighthouse keepers, still haunt the place. And that's happens to be, I believe that is the most photographed lighthouse in the world.
Really?
Portland Light. Yeah. Gorgeous area.
Now, we're going to go in August to a place we already talked about. That was your very first place you actually went to, which was the Lizzie Borden House in Fall River, Mass., close to home for you.
Most people know about the Lizzie Borden House.
What did you photograph on the calendar? Was it the outside, the inside? What was the picture?
One of the outside and one of the inside.
Okay. And was it that room with Mr. Borden on the couch that you did on the inside, or was it a different room?
That was actually the Borden, both rooms where the husband and wife died. So there's two little small inserts.
There's another house down the street or in Fall River where Lizzie Borden lived after all this happened, which is supposed to be even more haunted. Have you ever been to that house?
I have not. Maplecroft.
Yes. Yep.
Is the name. Yeah, I've actually been on the outside of it, but I have not been on the inside. I was going to photograph it about a year or two ago when Leanne bought it.
Yep.
So it was going to be part of the same property as the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast, but they ended up, I believe it's still for sale right now. They had to sell it again.
All right, now we go to September in Stowe, Vermont, Emily's Bridge.
Emily's Bridge, another classic covered bridge, New England covered bridge. This Emily that I don't think there's actually any records of an Emily, but the story goes that Emily was going to meet her lover at the bridge and they were going to run away and elope. She went to the bridge. He never showed up. She was heartbroken and committed suicide into the water below. And they say that you can hear her still crying and moaning. And if you drive your car through there at night, it'll get scratched. Classic haunting things like that. And yeah, it's a creepy place. Just to walk through the bridge, you get a weird feeling. It's just, that whole wooden bridge vibe.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to tell you, it's same today. Men always let their women down. And
that's it, right?
That's at least two stories on this. All right, go to October.
October.
The Ramtail Factory in Foster, Rhode Island.
Yeah, I love that place, Ramtail. So that's in Foster, as you said. There used to be a mill there. A textile mill that used to make, I believe it was yarns, and all over the floor when they would cut the yarn, they would leave these little pieces of fiber all over the place that actually looked like ram's tails, and that's how it got the name the Ramstail Factory. There was a couple of owners for the Ramstail Factory, and one of them ran into financial issues. And he was going to be outed. And what he did was, one of his jobs, aside from part owner, is that he was like kind of security. He would open the mill and close the mill, ring the bell when it was time to work, ring the bell when it was time to leave, that type of thing. Pegleg Walker is his name. He was outed and he was going to lose his portion of the business. They asked him for his key and he said, "You can grab this key from my cold dead hand," type of thing. That night, his last night, he committed suicide inside the mill and locked himself in there. And he had his key in his cold dead hand when they found him the next morning. Bell wasn't ringing. They went to go check, and they had to break the door down and find Peleg had taken his own life. And his grave is actually not too far away from where the mill is. People have seen the lantern that he would carry at night going through the woods there and often hear a bell ringing. Classic mill story like that.
All right, now we're to November, the Smith Harris House, Neontic, Connecticut.
Yep, and that's also called a lot of screaming places in this calendar.
Screaming to be bought.
That's called the Screaming House too. Gorgeous house. Used as a museum now. There was one room in there that they say they can often hear screaming a lot. And when I was there photographing that place, the docent there said, yeah, this was the place where the women would give birth in the room. And At least one woman owner died in the house during giving birth, and they say that that's her that you can hear screaming in the house from time to time. And the owner, or one of the docents there, swears that she's heard it before when there's nobody else has been in the house except her.
Wow. Now, the Omni Parker House Hotel, Boston, Massachusetts, the Charles Dickens Mirror. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, Charles Dickens Mirror. So that is really cool. They still have the room that Charles Dickens, when he went, and this was doing his whole campaign to bring Christmas back to New England. And he decided to rent a room there in the hotel. They still have the Charles Dickens room there. They have the original door that was on his suite, and they have the mirror. And the mirror, they say you can see Charles Dickens there from time to time, because he would use that mirror to practice reciting a Christmas carol in that mirror. So he would watch his own delivery and everything like that. And they say that in front of that mirror, if you look in the mirror, you can see him every now and then.
That's going to be tricky for a photographer to photograph a mirror. Did you photograph the mirror in that room?
I did. I actually shot it straight on and photoshopped the camera out. And only a couple of people have said, "How did you do that? I don't see the camera."
That's spooking its own.
But that was interesting. Going there was really cool, because I went there with the New England Legends guys. And as I'm photographing it, they're doing a segment in front of the mirror for the Creepy Christmas special. That's on Amazon Prime, by the way. Jeff is there, and I'm watching them. And I go, after it's all said and done, I'm like, "Jeff, do you realize what you were just doing?" He's like, "What?" And I'm like, "You were just reciting and practicing the segment that you were about to record with Tony, the videographer." I said, "That's exactly what Dickens used to use that mirror for. You just did the same thing." And he was like, "I didn't even know that." Yeah, you're right. It was
awesome.
really cool. I'm like, "I got a picture of you doing it, so I got proof."
That's great. Yeah, I got to tell you. So we've just pitched the calendar that they'll never be able to get unless they go on eBay and buy it for like $30,000, because it's going to be a collector's item. I tell you right now. So, but yeah, you guys do a great. I mean, your calendars, man. I would have them, if they can't get this year, get next year's, because it's always beautiful work that you guys do, and it's really well worth it. I mean, there's a lot of calendars that are just, people throw away calendars. This is just so awesome, especially if you're into the paranormal. Let's close by plugging some of your stuff. You mentioned New England Legends on Amazon Prime. Have you guys started filming again? I know you stopped for a while, right, because of the pandemic?
Yeah, we stopped for a while, so it's on hold right now. But if you go to Amazon Prime, if you look up New England Legends, you'll see every episode on there. And I believe the episode is still on there of the theater show that we did. Carl Johnson, Tim Weisberg, Andy Lake, and Jeff.
Oh, that was like a storytelling,
Yeah,
right? You each of those four guys got up and told stories, and they had your photography in the background,
so
right?
The whole documentary.
That was great. I love that. That was excellent. I actually saw that,
thanks.
so highly recommended.
Yeah, that was really cool. So if you go to Amazon Prime for New England Legends, or the website is Our New England Legends, you'll see everything, but it's also on Google Play and the Apple Podcasts and everywhere else too. So it's a lot of fun working with those guys. And it's a labor of love.
At least you got to the point where you were at least covering costs, I think Jeff said. People, when they go watch this on Amazon, I mean, it helps you guys pay for these and do more. So we totally encourage them to do that. You fingers crossed in 2021 to go out and do some more? Or?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The last time we were able to all get out together was 2018, and we did it was a 3-day journey. I think we did like over 800 miles up and down New England, just hitting all these places for the calendar and for the New England Legends episode. So yeah, it's we're itching. I actually saw Jeff Friday to pick up my calendars, because I got a few that I'm giving away for gifts too. So, but I saw him and I hadn't seen Jeff in so long. Yeah, so we're itching to get out there again for sure.
Oh, that's great. Now, closing again, where they can find you is your photography is at www.trigphotography.com. That's TRIG photography.com. And they can also find you on Facebook and Instagram if they just plug in that Trig Photography, correct?
Absolutely.
Cool. Frank, thank you so much. Excellent. See, we didn't need pictures for this. We could just talk. You walked us right through everything, which was great. You did a great job. Really appreciate it.
I had an awesome time, Bob. Thanks again for the invite. It's quite the honor to be on here. I really love, like I said, the documentary was fantastic, and I'm really enjoying the podcast. I'm buzzing through them back and forth on my way to work.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Frank. Appreciate it.
No problem, man. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Afraid of Nothing podcast. Please subscribe and like us on Facebook. Until next time, stay scared.
Hey, you're still here? Great. Then why not listen to another episode? Visit AfraidOfNothingPodcast.com to peruse all the shows. That's AfraidOfNothingPodcast.com. And while you're there, click the coffee cup icon to buy me a coffee and leave a review. I'll give you a shout-out in an upcoming episode. And the world will know how swell you are.